I never thought I'd see the day when my daughter's voice, already fragile, already fought for, would be stripped from her not by illness or fate, but by the cruel hands of a neighbor with a clipboard and a badge of entitlement. It happened in broad daylight during what was supposed to be the community's monthly Art in the Park event. Kids were laughing. Neighbors were strolling around with lemonade. And in the middle of that supposed slice of suburban peace, my disabled daughter was sitting at the community's open mic, clutching the cue cards she'd spent weeks practicing in front of the mirror. Her speech was barely 5 sentences long, 5 carefully whispered phrases about being brave and loving yourself, typed in large, bold letters and rehearsed in her sweet, stuttered tone. But she never got to finish them. Just as she uttered her second line, her voice shaky but filled with pride, I saw Karen charging across the grass like a storm cloud. She wasn't walking. She wasn't approaching. She was charging. And she was holding something. A brush. A cup. I thought she might trip. I thought she might shout. I thought maybe she'd just yell some HOA nonsense and leave like she usually did. But no, she didn't stop. She didn't speak. She didn't even look around to see who was watching. With terrifying calmness and the audacity of someone convinced she was the law, she dipped her thick, bristle brush into a container of wet, gray paint, matching the approved color palette of the community I later learned, and smeared it across my daughter's mouth. The bristles dragged across her lips as if scrubbing away a stain. My daughter gasped, eyes wide, frozen. Paint dripped from her chin. Her cue cards dropped. Her tiny hands flew to her mouth, trying to wipe it off. But the damage was already done. The microphone screeched as it hit the ground, and Karen just stood there, wiping her hand on a napkin as if she had cleaned up a mess. You're not allowed to use that platform without HOA approval, she said flatly. Especially not to speak uninvited. I couldn't move fast enough. My legs felt like lead. It was like my brain refused to believe what my eyes had seen. I had always known she disliked my daughter, her wheelchair, her soft speech, her resilience. But this wasn't dislike. This was violence. This was erasure. By the time I reached my daughter, she was sobbing silently, gray streaks smeared across her cheeks like war paint. Her lips trembled under the paint. Her chest rose and fell in rapid, confused bursts. She looked up at me, not with fear, but with one haunting question in her eyes. Why did no one stop her? I looked around. Silence. Mothers clutched their purses. Fathers stared at their phones. A few neighbors whispered but didn't move. The HOA president stood frozen at the gazebo, hands in his pockets. No one confronted her. No one helped. No one even called out the insanity that had just happened in front of 20 people. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just Karen. This entire neighborhood, this entire system was built to protect her and silence us. 3 months before that nightmare afternoon, we moved into Maplewood Estates with high hopes and cautious hearts. My wife and I had dreamed of a place where our daughter, Alina, could finally enjoy a quiet, safe neighborhood, one with smooth sidewalks for her wheelchair-friendly neighbors, and maybe even some kids her age who'd accept her without question. We thought we found it here. The brochures bragged about community spirit, the online forums were filled with glowing reviews, and the tree-lined streets looked like something out of a Hallmark movie. Everything felt picture-perfect, but we should have known pictures lie. Alina was born with cerebral palsy. She couldn't walk without her chair, and her speech, though improving with therapy, still came out soft and halting. But what she lacked in volume, she made up for in heart. She had a beautiful way of making people pause and truly listen. Every sentence she spoke felt like a victory. Every word was hard-earned. That's why when she asked us one evening, "Do you think I could talk at the art event?" we couldn't say no. It wasn't about attention. It was about courage. At first, the neighborhood welcomed us. Smiles at the mailbox. Quick waves from porches. But there was one face that always lingered, unsmiling and sharp. Karen. Karen lived 3 houses down in the pristine white-bricked home with matching petunias and a no-soliciting sign bolted to the mailbox like a threat. She was the HOA secretary, self-appointed enforcer of bylaws, paint colors, trash can hours, and front yard heights. And from day one, she zeroed in on us. Her first visit came 2 days after we moved in. No welcome pie, just a clipboard. I noticed your wheelchair ramp isn't painted in the approved trim color, she said, peering over her oversized sunglasses. We wouldn't want to set a precedent, would we? I laughed awkwardly, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. She handed us a violation slip for noncompliant paint tones and left. That was the start. In the weeks that followed, we received citations for leaving Alina's therapy equipment on the porch, visual obstruction, parking too close to the curb, unsafe clearance, and once for allowing excessive sidewalk noise when Alina giggled too loudly during a chalk session. I kid you not, my daughter's laughter was a violation in her eyes. It wasn't just paperwork, either. Karen would linger outside when we took Alina for walks. She once scolded her for bumping the hydrangeas with her chair while rolling by. Another time, she stopped Alina mid-sentence during a block party and told her, maybe wait until the grown-ups are done talking. It became clear she didn't see my daughter as a child. She saw her as an inconvenience. I tried to reason with her. Once, I asked gently if we'd done something to upset her. She smiled coldly and said, "You people always want exceptions. Rules exist for a reason." Then she turned and walked away. You people? I wasn't sure what she meant by that. Disabled families? Outsiders? Minorities? All of the above? We thought about filing a complaint, but the HOA board included her best friend, her cousin, and a man who seemed more interested in backyard barbecues than accountability. So we kept our heads down. We focused on Alina. She never let Karen's stares or comments break her spirit. She kept practicing her speech in her room, even when her hands trembled or her voice caught on syllables. She printed out her words in bold, practiced in front of the mirror, and timed herself until she could deliver it in under 3 minutes. She even picked a sparkly yellow dress for the big day, her favorite color. "I want them to see me," she whispered the night before. "Not just my chair." And for a moment, I believed they would. In the weeks leading up to the Art in the Park event, Karen's presence became more invasive, like a bad smell that lingered even after you closed the windows. She was everywhere, not just watching but monitoring, documenting, measuring. She'd stroll the sidewalks each morning like a prison warden, not a neighbor, with her phone in one hand and the HOA rulebook in the other. We tried to focus on Alina. She had circled the date of the event on the family calendar, decorated it with stickers, and titled it Alina's First Speech Day. Every night, we practiced together in the living room. She insisted we sit like an audience, no phones, full eye contact. If she stumbled, she didn't restart. She pushed through. I want to learn how to recover, she told me. Not just be perfect. But the closer we got to the event, the more Karen's actions escalated. It started with flyers. One morning, we found laminated signs posted around the community bulletin boards and on trees. All speakers for HOA-sponsored events must be pre-approved by the board. Unauthorized presentations will be subject to removal. There was no mention of this in any prior announcements. That same afternoon, I saw Karen standing smugly beside the new signs as a few elderly residents walked by. She pointed to the flyers and said, "We can't let just anyone take over our events. It's not a charity program." I confronted her, calmly. "She's a child, Karen," I said, "and it's a public community event. She just wants to say a few words about what art means to her." Karen adjusted her sunglasses, smiled like a crocodile, and said, "Then maybe she should submit a formal proposal like everyone else. We have procedures. Emotional manipulation doesn't override policy." It was the first time I genuinely feared her. Not because of what she said, but because she meant it. The next day, we found chalk drawings on our sidewalk, hearts, stars, smiley faces, all drawn by Alina. They were smeared and washed away. A water bucket sat nearby, still dripping. Karen's porch light camera pointed directly at our driveway, blinking with a blue LED. My wife clenched her jaw and muttered, "She did it. She's sending a message." Then came the HOA letter, delivered by hand. No stamp, no envelope. This is a formal reminder that participation in microphone-based activities at any HOA-endorsed function must align with our standards of community representation. All presentations must maintain decorum and uphold the image of Maplewood Estates. Content of a personal or sentimental nature is discouraged. I stared at the page, stunned. Personal or sentimental was code for our daughter. We debated pulling her out of the event. Not because we didn't believe in her, but because we feared what Karen might do. But Alina wouldn't have it. She can be mean, she whispered, but I'm not afraid of her. She doesn't get to erase me. Her words, not mine. So we doubled down. We printed extra copies of her speech. We practiced transitions in case of interruptions. We bought a small battery-powered microphone just in case the main one malfunctioned. We even invited a few friends from Alina's therapy group to come support her, other parents who knew the weight behind a child finding their voice. But we didn't realize Karen wasn't planning to interrupt. She was planning to destroy. 3 days before the event, someone slashed the tires on our accessible van. Clean cuts. Professional. The police called it likely random. But our security camera had caught a glimpse of a figure walking past at 3:14 a.m., hooded but the frame, it looked a lot like her nephew. The same one who attended HOA meetings as security. We couldn't prove it. We were told, no conclusive evidence. Sorry. Still, we made arrangements, rented a van, made it to the park early, set up in the second row, right in front of the stage. We were determined not to let Karen win, not today. That morning, Karen arrived late, in a neatly ironed pantsuit, holding a clipboard, smiling at everyone, hugging board members, laughing too loudly. She played the part of the community leader to perfection, but her eyes never left Alina. It was like she was waiting for her moment. And, unfortunately, she got it. The community park had never looked so festive. Banners with art in the park, celebrating expression, hung between trees, fluttering in the breeze. Children painted on easels, adults mingled near lemonade stands, and soft acoustic music floated through the air. If anyone had arrived without context, they'd think it was the perfect suburban Saturday. But for us, it was a battlefield. We sat close to the small wooden stage. Alina sat between us, her cue cards on her lap, her yellow dress catching sunlight like hope itself. She kept whispering her lines to herself, barely audible, but I could hear the rhythm. She was ready. Her name wasn't on the official schedule, but we'd spoken to the event coordinator, a kind teenager named Mia, who said she could squeeze Alina in for a 3-minute slot right before the award ceremony. It's totally fine, she told us with a smile. We love hearing from community members, especially kids. I'll even adjust the mic for her chair height. Alina beamed. We exhaled. It felt, for a moment, like everything would be okay. And then Karen arrived at the side of the stage. She wasn't smiling anymore. She was scanning the list on Mia's clipboard, and the second she saw Alina's name scribbled in ink at the bottom, her jaw tightened. I wasn't informed of this addition, she said coldly. Mia, bless her, stood her ground. It's just a short speech. She's a kid. It's a community thing. Karen leaned in close, her voice low but sharp enough to cut glass. If you want to be responsible for breaking HOA protocol, go right ahead. But if this causes trouble, it's on you. Mia looked shaken. She nodded slowly but didn't erase the name. Karen backed away, crossed her arms, and fixed her stare on Alina. It was like a countdown began. Finally, Mia approached the mic, cheeks flushed. And now, she said, trying to keep her tone light, we have a very special guest. She's been practicing for weeks and wants to share a few words about what art means to her. Please welcome Alina. Polite claps. A few turned heads. Nothing big. But to Alina, it was everything. She rolled herself forward. Carefully. Proudly. She stopped at the mic, adjusted her cards, took a small breath, and began. My name is Alina, she said softly. I'm 10 years old and I use a wheelchair. Sometimes people think that means I don't have things to say. She paused. But I do. Just then, the crowd murmured. I turned. Karen was moving, Fast, she pushed past two picnic tables, nearly knocked over a toddler, and headed straight for the stage. At first, I thought she was just going to whisper something rude, maybe pull Mia aside, or grab the mic. But she didn't. Karen climbed the two steps, walked directly to Alina, and without saying a word, dipped a brush into a cup of gray paint. Then she painted it across my daughter's mouth. Like she was covering up graffiti. The moment froze. People gasped. Alina dropped her cards. Her hands instinctively flew to her face. Gray streaked down her chin and onto her dress. She didn't cry, not yet. She just sat there, stunned, shaking. Karen stood beside her, calmly wiping her hand with a paper towel like she'd just cleaned a dirty window. Unauthorized speaking isn't permitted during HOA functions, she said into the mic. We have rules for a reason. The crowd was silent. For too long. That's when I stood. No, I exploded. I sprinted toward the stage, my heart pounding like a drum in my ears. I didn't care about rules, decorum, or the fact that my voice was cracking. You just assaulted a child. I screamed. What the hell is wrong with you? Karen turned to me slowly, like I was the problem. She shouldn't have been up here. It's inappropriate. This is a community event, not a personal showcase. She's 10. I roared, and she was giving a speech, not vandalizing your precious HOA. By then, others were standing too, some in shock, some unsure. A few mothers had tears in their eyes, but no one said a word to Karen. No one touched her. No one helped us. Mia tried. She offered tissues. She apologized. She cried, but she looked terrified. Like even comforting us would get her reported. Alina just looked at me with wide, wet eyes, still frozen in disbelief. Why did she do that? She whispered. I didn't know what to say. There was no logic, no justification. Only hatred dressed up as policy. Only cruelty with a badge and a clipboard. Alina didn't cry right away. That was the part that haunted me most. She just sat there, completely still, lips trembling beneath the gray smear of paint like she was trying to stay composed for us. Her body, already fragile from years of therapy, seemed even smaller in that moment. Her yellow dress, the one she picked so proudly, was stained not just with HOA-approved paint, but with humiliation. I knelt beside her, gently pulling her wheelchair back from the mic as Karen stood on the stage like some self-declared queen of order. I remember reaching for a tissue, but it was useless. The paint had already dried like cement over her mouth. It wasn't just the visual. It was the symbolism, the erasure, the silencing. And still no one moved. People watched like it was a scene from a play they didn't pay to see. A few murmured to each other. One woman gasped and pulled out her phone, but not to help, just to record. The HOA president, standing beneath the gazebo, pretended to take a call. The man grilling hot dogs shifted uncomfortably, but turned away. I tried to wipe the paint gently. It's okay, I whispered. You're okay. She's not going to touch you again. Alina nodded slowly. Her eyes blinked fast, not wanting to cry in public. But a single tear still slipped down her cheek, and I could see her trying to be brave, not for herself, but for us. And then, finally, a voice. It wasn't from an adult. It wasn't a leader or board member. It was from another child, a little boy near the art easels who yelled, "That lady's mean." It broke the silence like thunder. A few other kids giggled. Then another said, "Why did she do that to her?" A girl whispered, "That's not fair." That's when parents finally started murmuring louder. A woman whispered, "Isn't that illegal?" Another said she touched a child. With paint. In the mouth? Karen turned and stepped down from the stage, calm, composed, still pretending like she had done a necessary duty for the community. I stood up fully, blocking her path. "You need to leave," I said, shaking. "I was enforcing community policy," she replied, emotionless. "If you'd submitted a request like everyone else, none of this would have happened." "She's a child, not a business permit," I snapped. Karen raised her chin. "Then she should learn to follow rules like the rest of us." I don't remember what I said after that. Or maybe I didn't say anything. My fists were clenched, my chest felt like it would explode, and every part of me wanted to scream, but Alina needed me to hold it together. The police arrived 20 minutes later. Someone must have called them. Maybe it was Mia. Maybe it was a bystander. But by the time the officers approached, Karen was already at her booth, smiling and handing out HOA brochures like nothing happened. I told them everything. So did Mia. We showed the paintbrush, the cue cards, the microphone, the gray stains still drying on my daughter's face. The officer nodded, took statements, took photos, but then came the line I'll never forget. It's a difficult situation. It might fall under misdemeanor assault, but proving intent and harm in a community event could be tricky. Tricky. They said they'd file a report, maybe interview Karen further, maybe consult with the HOA board. They didn't arrest her. They didn't remove her. They didn't even tell her to leave the event. Karen stood by the lemonade table with the HOA president laughing again. Laughing like we were the problem. Alina didn't want to stay. She wanted to go home. So we left. I carried her to the van because her arms were shaking too hard to move her chair herself. She didn't talk during the ride, just stared out the window, one hand clutched around her stained cue cards like they were her shield. At home, we helped her wash up. It took 3 rounds of warm water, baby oil, and gentle dabbing to remove the dried paint from her skin. The outline of her lips remained red and irritated for days. That night, she placed the cards on her bedside table and whispered, "Do I have to stop talking in public now?" It shattered me. I leaned in, kissed her forehead, and said, "No, baby, never. You don't stop. She doesn't get to win." But I wasn't sure I believed it myself, because in that moment, it felt like she had won. The next few days passed like fog. Alina barely spoke. Her usual morning smile, the one that beamed even on therapy days, was gone. She sat quietly during meals, nodding instead of answering, tracing invisible shapes on the table with her fingertip. Her cue cards remained untouched beside her lamp, and she didn't ask to go outside, not even once. Not to the park, not for chalk time, not even for our usual sidewalk races in her chair. Her silence was heavier than words. My wife and I tried to keep things normal. We made her favorite meals, played her favorite music, even invited her therapy group over for a movie night. But even then, she stayed curled up on the couch, watching but not laughing. I found her one night in her room, flipping through a picture book of women she admired. Helen Keller, Malala Frida Kahlo. Her voice came so soft, I almost didn't hear it. Do you think people ever wanted them to be quiet, too? My throat tightened. Absolutely, I said, but they didn't listen to the people who tried to silence them. They spoke anyway. That's why the world remembers them. She nodded once and closed the book. That's when I knew. It wasn't just the paint. It wasn't just the humiliation. It was the message Karen had burned into her that her voice didn't matter. And as a father, that broke me. So I did what I had to. I started calling everyone. I filed a formal police complaint. I wrote emails to the local news. I posted on every community group, parenting forum, and HOA watchdog board I could find. I uploaded the full story with photos, the paintbrush, the cue cards, Alina's speech, even a short video a bystander had taken of Karen wiping her brush. It wasn't perfectly framed, but it was clear enough. At first, the response was quiet. A few comments, some sympathy. Then it snowballed. Within 48 hours, my inbox was flooded. Parents from all over the state shared similar HOA horror stories. Disabled rights advocates reached out asking for interviews. A lawyer who specialized in civil rights offered to help for free. The story hit local media by the end of the week. And with that, Karen's perfectly painted world began to crack. The HOA board held an emergency meeting, but not to apologize. No, they released a statement defending Karen's strict enforcement of guidelines and called the incident an unfortunate misunderstanding. They said the paintbrush was not used with harmful intent and that Alina was not physically injured, as if injury was the only metric that mattered, as if silencing a child in front of a crowd didn't leave scars deeper than any bruise. That was my breaking point. I stood outside their next HOA meeting, bullhorn in hand, with Alina beside me, holding a new sign she had drawn herself. My voice isn't a violation. We weren't alone. More than 50 neighbors came. Some carried signs. Some brought their kids. Some just stood quietly with us. But their presence screamed louder than words. Karen didn't show. The board called the protest disruptive. The news called it powerful. And for the first time, Alina smiled again. Not because the world was suddenly fair, but because she fought back. Because we fought back. Because people showed up. And silence finally wasn't the only sound. Justice doesn't come in a neat package. It's not always a gavel slam or a public apology. Sometimes it comes in pieces. Quiet victories. Shifts in tone. A crack in the armor of people who once thought they were untouchable. That's what happened to Karen. After the protest outside the HOA building, the local news ran a follow-up. This time, the tone was sharper. They had reviewed witness statements, footage from phones, and even highlighted the HOA's dismissive statement. The headline read, HOA rules or harassment. Local family speaks out after child silenced at community event. That article went viral, not nationwide, but enough to spark outrage across neighboring towns and HOA communities. The comments section overflowed with support. Some residents of Maplewood Estates even admitted they had been afraid to speak up about Karen for years, fearing retaliation or fines. Her power, they realized, only worked because no one ever challenged it. But now people were watching. The legal side took a little longer. Our pro bono attorney filed a formal civil complaint. He framed it not only as assault, but also as a violation of disability rights under both state law and the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA. The fact that Karen held a position of power within a governing body made it worse. We didn't sue for money. We asked for three things: Karen's immediate removal from the HOA board, a formal public apology issued to Alina and our family, mandatory disability sensitivity training for all HOA board members. Karen's lawyer tried to push back, calling it a baseless smear campaign. But the footage spoke louder than any excuse. And the community, now awake, wasn't on her side anymore. Under growing pressure, the board called another meeting. This time, it was packed wall to wall. Karen arrived late, her usual smugness replaced by something tight and defensive. She tried to speak, to explain that it was an overreaction, that she didn't intend harm, and that the child should have been supervised more closely. But it was too late. The board voted 4-1 to remove her from her post. She stood up red-faced and stormed out without saying a word. No apology, no remorse, just silence. That same evening, the board issued a new statement. We, the HOA of Maplewood Estates, deeply regret the events that occurred at our recent community function. We recognize the harm caused to Alina and her family and acknowledge the need for immediate reforms to ensure inclusivity, safety, and respect for all residents. We apologize to Alina for the pain caused and commit to rebuilding trust within our community. Was it perfect? No. Was it overdue? Absolutely. But to Alina, it meant something. We printed out the statement and framed it beside her speech cards. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder that when the world tells you to be quiet, you don't whisper, you speak louder. A few weeks later, Alina was invited to speak at a local library's children's storytelling night. They called her a brave voice in our community. She wore her yellow dress again, clean, proud, radiant, and delivered her same speech. This time, she didn't stutter once. This time, she got a standing ovation. And this time, no one dared to silence her. There's something sacred about a child's voice, especially when that voice has had to fight for every syllable. Alina's speech wasn't just a few lines on a card. It was the result of years of therapy, late-night practice sessions, and a heart that refused to give up. And when someone tried to silence her, literally, we all faced a moment of truth. Do we stay quiet? Or do we rise? What happened in our neighborhood wasn't just about HOA rules or paint or bylaws. It was about power. It was about prejudice hiding behind policy. And it was about how easy it is for communities to turn a blind eye when the discomfort doesn't touch them directly. But silence is a choice, and we chose to break it. What Karen did was cruel, but what followed, your voices, was powerful. From the emails and phone calls to the parents who showed up at that protest with handmade signs, every single gesture proved one thing: no act of courage, however small, ever goes unnoticed. I've learned that when someone tries to erase you, the most radical thing you can do is show up louder. Not with fists, not with hate, but with truth, with unity, with stories that refuse to die in the dark. Alina's story doesn't end with a courtroom or a resignation letter. It continues every time she speaks in public, every time she lifts her hand in class, every time she whispers, "I want to try again." And if you're watching this right now, if you've ever been told that your voice isn't worth hearing, this is for you. Your voice matters. Your story matters. And no matter how thick the paint or how powerful the gatekeepers, you have the right to be seen. You have the right to be heard. And you are not alone. If this story moved you, please share it. Let people know this isn't just about us. This happens every day in different forms. Compass subscribe to the HOA stories, where we expose injustice, elevate unheard voices, and remind the world that Real community begins with compassion, not control. And remember, never whisper when you were born to speak.